All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Happy Monday. My name is Charlene Wu, and it is my pleasure to introduce a dear colleague of mine as our next speaker, Candice Hogan. Candice is a senior manager on the machine-assisted cognition team here at the Toyota Research Institute. The goal of the machine-assisted cognition team is to develop AI systems to augment human decision-making by advancing research at the intersection of behavioral science, machine learning, and human-computer interaction. Candice is passionate about bringing behavioral science to life, whether it be through work in developing novel technology or through recapturing joy during uncertainty. It is so fitting that we have Candice today to speak about recapturing joy. Having known Candice for a number of years, I've admired her resilience and optimism. Through personal and professional challenges, I've observed that Candice doesn't just survive through these tough moments, but she views these as opportunities to grow and learn and thrive. As a result, she's a respected scientist, a compassionate leader, and a trusted colleague. We are so lucky that she has chosen to share some of her learnings with us today. So without further ado, please welcome Candice.
Thank you so much, Charlene. So I'm extremely excited to talk with you all today about recapturing joy. And a little about me, and thank you so much, Charlene, for the introduction. I am a behavioral scientist by training. I earned my PhD in psychology from Stanford. I studied things like emotion regulation, how emotional experience changes across the lifespan, and how our health behaviors like sleep and exercise influence our emotions. I've been very fortunate to have opportunities to continue to apply behavioral science in different roles in tech. And as Charlene mentioned, I'm currently a senior manager at the Machine Assisted Cognition Group at Toyota Research Institute. Today, I want to talk about emotional experience and in particular, ways that we can build joy in our lives. As a behavioral scientist, I learned a lot about emotions during my training. I learned that emotions are foundational. They influence our motivation, our decisions, our actions. They even influence our health. I learned that negative emotions generally motivate us to take action. Fear, for example, tells us we want to try to escape. And positive emotions help us build resources. Love helps us build close relationships. Interest helps us build knowledge and new skills. I also learned that our emotions are malleable. Our thoughts, actions, interactions with others all feed back and influence our emotional experience. I learned all of these things about emotions, and yet my own emotions were still completely upended when life threw me something that I wasn't prepared for. In the fall of 2020, my husband got really sick. It turned out that an autoimmune liver disease that he had had for a long time had suddenly gotten much worse, and his doctors informed us that it was time for him to go on the transplant list. This was terrifying, it was overwhelming, and as time went on, it started to sink in that this was our new reality. This was going to be something we would be dealing with for a long time into the foreseeable future, and likely we would be dealing with uncertainty from here on out. This was different from any other difficult situation I've faced in my life so far. Usually when there's something hard or something stressful, I just have a tendency to focus on getting through it, just getting through to the other side. But in this case, I needed to figure out not just how to live with the uncertainty, but how to enjoy life in spite of it. The circumstances of my situation are fairly unique, I hope, but I think that the experience of uncertainty in many forms has been common for many of us over these last 2 years. One thing that I realized is that with all the types of uncertainty and stressful circumstances we go through, there are skills that we can build to help us get better at finding joy, even as we face these challenges. And reflecting on my experience in the scientific literature of what builds positive emotions, there are 3 broad categories I'll share today. Ways that we can shift our perspective, connecting with others, and time investments. One of the most immediate things that we can influence is how we're interpreting a situation. Think about times that you've been really excited and times that you felt really stressed. Our heart beats fast. We start to feel butterflies in our stomach. But it's how you interpret the context that you're in that tells us whether we're excited for a challenge or whether we're nervous about a threat. Often we can't change the situation, but one skill we can work on building is shaping how we're thinking about the situation. One strategy I found really helpful for this is self-compassion. Self-compassion is treating yourself the way that you would treat a friend or a close colleague. And this can be really hard to do because oftentimes we are our own harshest critics. But we can try to ask ourselves the same questions that we would ask to a friend or to a colleague who's having a hard time. What can I do for you? What can I take off your plate? I remember lying in bed one night, I couldn't sleep. It just felt like I was being pulled in 1,000 directions. It felt like everything was too much. I was ruminating on the thing that had pushed me over the edge that day. I'd signed up for a program at work, helping to interview candidates for other teams to bring in an outside perspective. And I felt really conflicted because it was something that I cared about and that I thought was important, and I wanted to do it, but I also felt extremely stressed thinking, how am I going to fit in these hours of training in the next few weeks, and then multiple hours every week after that for fitting in these interviews? And then I had a reflection. What do I need? I need to not do this. And it occurred to me, I don't have to do this. It sounds so simple, but it was a real light bulb moment. I didn't really need anybody else's permission. I just needed that permission from myself. And as soon as I realized that, I started to feel some relief, and I shifted out of threat mode and back into calm. Another way that we can build positive emotions is through connecting with others. One of the most well-documented findings in psychology is the benefit of social support, especially during difficult times. It can be hard to connect with others during these times. We can definitely have a tendency to feel alone or isolated, and I certainly did. I didn't know anyone else who had gone through what I was going through. One way that I was able to connect with others through this was through authenticity. When my husband got sick, I was pretty new at my job. I didn't know colleagues very well. And at first, I didn't really feel comfortable sharing what I was going through with them. So I tried to keep it to myself, but pretty soon I was finding it harder and harder to stuff it down and act like everything was normal. And then I'm overthinking things and feeling like, oh, I seemed really stressed in that meeting and I know why, but no one else does. So I finally decided to open up and talk to my team and to my manager. From my side, it felt like such an immense relief just to share. And I felt more seen and understood. And it felt like having that shared context allowed me to enjoy my work again, and possibly even to do a better job. I was also really surprised by my coworkers' reactions. They told me that it was brave for me to share. They told me that it made it easier for them to share things that were going on in their lives. And ultimately, I felt like we were closer and that we had a stronger team because we were able to be more authentic with each other. A third way that we can build positive emotions is by investing time in activities that are restorative and that bring us joy. Over time, I found that daily movement and time outside helped me to feel my most joyful. When my husband's health got worse, my son was about a year old. So at that point, it was very difficult for me to find the time for the long, intense hikes that I really would have loved to do. But my son was an early riser. So I would strap him on my chest and we would go for walks every morning, generally in Golden Gate Park, which is what's pictured here. And we would go to the pond and we would see ducks and we would walk through tunnels. And after having that time outside, I felt ready to handle the day ahead. And now when I reflect back on that time, I feel so happy for the special time that the two of us had together. And I have these positive memories to look back on, even in the time when I have a lot of stressful memories as well. Finding activities that bring us joy is usually the easy part, but finding time to actually do them tends to be a lot harder. Life is busy, and these aren't things that we have to do, so it can become really easy to deprioritize them. But taking time for ourselves and for activities that we enjoy is an investment, and it pays off in the form of resilience. One skill we can practice is setting and holding boundaries around our time to protect the time to do the things that we enjoy. Think about your schedule and what happens to your schedule when you have a busy week ahead, which, if you're like me, can feel like every week. Often the first thing that we cut is our personal time. And I want to encourage us to start treating time for the things that we enjoy as a necessity in our schedule, and let that time be one of the big rocks that you put into your schedule first. For me, what's been helping the most lately is blocking time on my calendar. I block off an hour every day for lunch, and that gives me time to eat. And then I usually have 20 or 30 minutes to get outside and walk before I need to go to my next meeting. And this certainly doesn't work out every day, but it does help me to ensure that I'm spending time doing something I enjoy at least a few times a week. What I've shared today are a few strategies to help us recapture joy, even when we're going through difficult times. I shared some of the things that I have found helpful, but of course, there are many other approaches to try. I asked my friends and family and also the WT2 community what they do to find joy. And these are some of the ideas that you all shared. One was feeling gratitude, or thinking about gratitude, and even gratitude journaling. And people said that it helps them to see the different positive things that are going on in their lives. Meditation, spending time in personal rituals, and morning coffee was one that came up a few times. Spending time volunteering or helping others, and some of you shared the different ways that you're finding time to do that. Time with friends and loved ones and pets came up many times. And spending time in hobbies, bowling and painting by numbers and gardening were some of the hobbies that you shared. So these are all tools in our toolbox that we can reach for, and they're skills that we can practice so that they become easier for us to access over time. Challenges are inevitable, but I hope that through our discussion today, you have a couple of new ideas for ways to recapture joy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Candice. And just a reminder to the group here, if you have any questions for Candice, please go ahead and pop them into the Q&A, and we'll ask Candice for her additional advice. One question I have for you, Candice, is I'm thinking about the three learnings you practice and the list of all the other ones that you heard from the group today, which are so wonderful. How would you recommend someone starts? Like, you're just overwhelmed with all the different things. We can't all go do all those things today. So how do you start to sift and filter which ones you try, and how did you land on those three today that you shared with us?
Right. So thank you for that question, Charlene. And I think I'll respond first to how I landed on what I wanted to talk through today. And that was really by reflecting back on my experience and what I had found sort of the most helpful. So I wouldn't say those are the only things that I kind of tried out or tried to do, but they're really the things that I found made the biggest difference for me. And in terms of folks trying to kind of jump into this, I really feel that finding time to do something that you enjoy, even if it doesn't have to be for a long, long time. I think sometimes we get really overwhelmed with feeling like I have to find an hour and I have to have an hour every day, or that kind of mentality. But instead, just finding even something small that you can do for yourself every day, and something that will truly make you feel happy to do it, whatever that is.
Thank you so much for sharing. We've got a couple questions coming in. Here's one I think a lot of us can resonate with. So you mentioned sort of keeping that time boundary. Beverly's asking, how do you maintain your block time on the calendar? I feel like people always book over it.
That is such an excellent question. I have been extremely fortunate. I feel that the company culture is a big aspect of that. And I do feel that at TRI, people are quite respectful of the boundaries. But whenever I do have, meeting requests or things that come in, and a lot of times that might be for interviews or for doing things that are not a typical part of my schedule, just sending a quick message and saying, I'm really trying to hold that time. Would it be possible? Is there any other time that might work? People are really receptive. I mean, I guess I don't fault people for trying. Sometimes, they're just trying to find a time in different crammed schedules, but being open to having that conversation with them, a lot of times they'll be really receptive.
Thank you. Marielle has a question, and she's also sharing that she's so impressed with your career journey, as many of us are here. She's interested in looking into more ways to incorporate psychology principles and research into business and would like to learn more about your path. So she may be reaching out to you to connect one-on-one later on, but for this audience here, do you have any suggestions or words of wisdom for people that are looking to get started in that area?
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Marielle, and I'll be excited to talk with you about that. I think that this is outside of just psychology, but a lot of us may have expertise in certain areas, and we're in our company, we're in our business, and we see ways that we think that expertise might be beneficial, and maybe no one else sees it yet. But if you can find one champion, and it's just by talking to other people at your company or even outside of your company, if you can find another champion who understands that expertise and that value, then you can start building up a little bit of community around that. And for me, it has given the opportunity to exercise skills that I never thought would be possible moving into tech out of academia.
I was also touched by your story when you felt the courage to share your personal struggles in a professional work environment. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you got that courage to share and do so? Like, it's amazing that it was received so well, but what was the thought process that you had that enabled yourself to overcome that hurdle of like, how do I be true to myself, but how do I also think about this balance between my personal and professional worlds?
Absolutely. It was definitely something, that I put off for a little while, but at a certain point, it was becoming a lot harder for me to not talk about it than it would be for me to talk about. And I reflected on, my personal values, and I think authenticity is one of my strongest personal values, and I want it to come through in my work as well. It was something that the company had stated was something that the company valued, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna try them. I'm gonna see if they really mean it. And in fact, I found that it was true. When I was able to kind of get through that initial nervousness, there was a lot of receptivity, and I just felt support by having other people understand.
That's amazing. And this is a follow-on question from Jen. What would you recommend leaders do to make it easier for folks to be as authentic as you have been in sharing?
Absolutely. I might have a personal bias here because clearly I feel okay about sharing a lot of personal things about myself, but I think being open yourself is the absolute best way to create an environment where other people feel like it's okay for them to share things with you. To the extent that you're able to and that you feel comfortable, finding ways that you can, start to create that trust on your side, I think helps build it throughout the whole team.
Is that something that you modeled after, like, did you have a leader or someone who showed that like made you sort of internalize that as a leader yourself? Or are there any other examples with the learnings you shared today or that you've seen where you've sort of learned from someone that you've worked with or that you've admired and been like, I'm going to try that? And if so, what was that?
Right. So I think one of the most powerful readings that I had on authenticity was Radical Candor by Kim Scott. I hope that my memory is serving me well right now. But this is about leadership and really about how to create that authentic leadership. And I had read that a couple of years before I went through this situation. And it was something that just felt true to me. It felt like, I think that's right. I think that's, my leadership style, and I want to try it.
I think the folks here today are really touched by the personal story you shared about your husband's health, and they're just sharing sentiments and thoughts and hoping that he's doing okay. There was a question that's come in from Isabel asking, has this ever resulted in people oversharing or sharing too much about their personal issues? And if that were to occur, do you have any recommendations or suggestions?
That's a really good question. In my experience so far, I haven't had a situation where I felt like it then led to kind of backfiring and kind of oversharing. I think if someone does share something that feels like it's crossing kind of a personal boundary for you, that having a private conversation with that person and just being, I think that goes back to authenticity, being willing to say, hey, you shared that and it must have been important to you for you to share it. I felt a little bit, I felt a little weird about it, and kind of talking that through is the best way to kind of address that situation and then work through that together.
Wonderful. This is a great and really important question coming from the audience. It's an anonymous question, so don't know who it's from, but I think it's an important one that we all would love to hear your answer to. When leadership is all male, how do you introduce vulnerability without being the emotional female?
That is a very important question. I'm reflecting on this a little bit because I really want to recognize that all of the places that I've had the opportunity to work, I have been very privileged to have great women role models, women leaders to look up to, and that have really been paving the path. I think that in this case, starting at your level and with your individual, within your level, kind of creating that peer vulnerability, and then using that peer vulnerability and spreading hopefully to other men at that level will help to start filter up and go from the bottoms up.
Thank you so much. I'm also checking the chat here. I think other folks have also heard of the book as well, Radical Candor. It's a great one. I would recommend that as well. Another question, just sort of reflecting on that book. What's your process when you read advice or get advice from others about figure out if it's something that you want to try or something that feels authentic to you? So how can you help each of us sort of tune our signals for understanding what does authenticity look like for each of us and how do we practice that?
Right. For me, I think it comes back to the self-compassion, because the self-compassion is a lot of us throughout life, we kind of are trained by society and trained in a lot of ways to push down what we want or what we think, and just take in the signals about what other people expect of us and what we think that we're supposed to do to please others in various ways. But if we can start to tap into the self-compassion and we can start to listen to ourselves a little bit more closely, and we can start to be okay with things that we agree or don't agree with. And those are big steps. I don't say those as small things. Those are big steps that take, sometimes years to kind of get comfortable with. But once you are able to tune in to that feeling, it becomes easier as new information comes in to say, no, I don't think that that's for me. That's an idea that exists in the world, but that one's not for me. Or yeah, that feels really true. I think that is aligned with my values and I want to incorporate that.
Thank you so much. We have just a few minutes here, so if anyone else has any questions that they would like for Candice to answer, please do pop them into the Q&A. Just scanning the chats to make sure I haven't missed anything else. We're looking good. Candice, if no other questions come at the moment, are there any parting words or thoughts you'd like to share with the group?
I just wanted to, thank the group and the WT2 community for sharing. I opened up a couple of threads in the app, in the community, to kind of understand what other people do to go through stressful times. And I really appreciate the courage to share there. Some folks also share difficulties that they've been going through. And I really appreciate your sharing, your coming here, thinking through these things together. And I hope for all of us that we can find some time and create that space so that we can feel joy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Candice. It was always a pleasure to listen to you and learn from you. I'm sure others did as well. And I think that's a wrap for us.
Thank you so much.